call to order.
It's a lease to own.
GTV, we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay.
So welcome public and members that are watching us on TV. This is Thursday, July 20th, 2023. This is the Capital Improvements Program Committee meeting. We are going to have a discussion with the library and the sewer committees, or the sewer, tell me the department, thank you. And then we will be going over some minutes and business regarding the matrix. I'm going to start by going around the room and having everyone introduce themselves. I'll start with you, Alan, please.
Ellen Pomakowitz, Goffstown School Board.
Danielle Besora, Assistant Town Administrator and Finance Director.
Jim Raymond.
Kelly Boyer, Select Board Representative.
Kimberly Peace.
Samantha Kearns, Budget Committee.
Brad Parkhurst, Community Member at Large.
Joanne Duffy, Planning and Economic Development Director.
Thank you. So, Danielle, do you want to let sewer and library go and then we'll address this?
Yeah,
Okay,
I think
so
that would be great.
there are sections of the new matrix that we received tonight. We just referred to the one that we were handed out tonight.
Do you have a preference as to who's going first? If sewer's going first,
I
that's
figured
page
they went
5.
rock, paper, scissors.
Okay.
Sewer's going
You made it
first?
to the table first.
There we go. Okay, so that's,
page 5 of 12 on the new matrix is where you'll see
okay,
their items. Nothing changed in their section from the previous matrix.
okay. Thank you.
So, our next 6 years, we are...
Let's have you introduce
Oh,
yourself
sorry.
first.
Corey White, sewer foreman.
Dave Pierce, I'm one of the 3 commissioners.
Thank you.
Corey, as sewer foreman, he tells us what pipes are 80 to 90 years old or have other defects and need to be replaced. He's the one who knows the status of all the sewer pipes, and he puts together for the commission the 6-year program of pipes to be replaced.
Okay.
So,
In other words, ask him, not you.
yes.
Okay, right?
So, our next 6 years are, it's the same neighborhood we've been working on. It's the flats in Pinardville, Hagan Street, Rochambeau.
Okay.
So that whole area of town is super flat, and it's old clay pipe, and none of it is in good shape. It's all kind of goes like this, doesn't flow right. Most of our backups come from that area, and a lot of it's just old and broken. So we're it's a complete replacement where we take all the manholes, all the pipe, everything comes out, all new goes back in. We try to do around between 600 and 700 feet a year, and most every year ranges between 600,000 and 700,000.
Jim?
Is that rate of replacement based on capacity for doing the work, or is it a money limit, or how do you arrive
We
at
try to
that?
keep it, originally it was always trying to keep around 500,000, just like for cost wise, but in inflation, everything else, it's gone up, but we try to keep it.
In the best of all worlds, what would you do?
Best of all worlds, I would try to do a complete street at start and not do half and half.
Would that,
He's referring from along a particular street from intersection to
sure,
intersection.
is there cost savings in doing that?
Not really. I mean, versus you can split it into 1 year to the next. The cost isn't going to be that much higher the next year. So
You know what I'm getting at,
The-
it's false economy if you spread it out versus,
The area where we do have some cost savings is if
sorry, thank you.
if Public Works needs to replace the storm drainage, which may be on the same side as the sewer line, or it could be on the other side of the street from the sewer line, but if Public Works needs to replace the storm drainage, then typically they might ask our contractor to make a bid to do the storm drain at the same time while he's mobilized on site. Where the cost savings comes in is then in rebuilding the street and putting new asphalt down. Public Works will pick up 50% of it, and the sewer department will pick up 50%. If we work alone, then we have to pick up the entire re-asphalting.
How much coordination do you do with DPW?
This year, it's not much because I don't actually have any drainage on the street we're redoing.
Okay.
But last year, we did Lewis Street, which half of the street, the sewer main was underneath the drainage.
Oh, wow.
And the drainage on that street was terrible. So between us and Public Works, we all sat down and came up with a plan to do all the work at the same time.
Good.
So we could redo the entire street and not have half a street that's new, half that's old.
That's good.
The revenue limitation is we stay within our revenue amount that comes in that will fully cover the 600,000 to 700,000 cost of a typical year's worth of work. We do have a reserve fund we can tap. You know, if we're only bringing in $500,000 a year in revenue that can be allocated towards replacing old pipes, well, we have a reserve fund to cover the shortfall. But the bottom line, as an enterprise fund, our revenues totally cover the expense of the CIP projects.
Now, the sewer funds that, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
the sewer funds that we use, this is the sewer fund that we all pay into, whether we're
The
in the
user
village
fees.
or in Bernardville.
Yes,
Yep.
Brad, you're a customer.
I know I am.
Wait, but I didn't think I realized that. Wait, so everyone in town contributes to the sewer fund?
Yep. We have 2,100 customers.
And they pay into the sewer?
A typical
Right.
home pays $400 a year.
Okay, thank you.
So
I'm on septic and water. No, I don't.
Homes with larger bedrooms may pay more than 400. If you have an accessory dwelling associated with your project, your home, you will pay slightly more than 400. And of course, we have some very large customers, the college, nursing home, which they get into $20,000 and $30,000 a year.
Okay.
We don't make policy, we look at capital needs. But, so that's where at least I start my assessment. And then you look at what your financial limitations are in meeting those needs. So I asked, given your capital needs, would you accelerate this, or is this, in your opinion, a sufficiently adequate schedule to address the needs?
In my opinion, it's sufficient.
Okay.
This is we're in the risk business of anticipating what sewer lines are going to go totally bad. And like you said, we're sufficiently comfortable with the rate of work that we're doing.
Okay. Which is why we wanted you to come in, even though it doesn't cost the taxpayer. Still, our job is to address capital needs, so we need to hear from you that, yes, you are, rather than, don't worry about it, doesn't cost the taxpayer. It's not. Our analysis is a little deeper than that.
Yeah.
It should be anyway, as it always.
So we appreciate if you would endorse our 6-year plan of various roads. That's our presentation.
It looks fairly balanced, and we will trust that you know where you stop and start your pipe lengths, so I have no comment or question.
I do have one other question from Brad's comments. Do we need to do anything to address the perceived needs of other people in town? Or is it a sufficiently compelling case that you need to address this area first?
This area needs to be addressed first. It's the worst part. The worst sewer lines that are in that neighborhood.
So Brad, suck it up and deal.
His is actually, it's new by his house. Newer.
Well, that newer, so that's it, like, obviously they're digging me up a little bit. I assume while they're down, they take a look at the sewer lines, but
Everything is going to be, after DPW is done and we bring all the manholes back up flush with the asphalt, I'll have Belmore come in and all of that gets cleaned.
Okay.
Is there any planning on extending the lines?
There's discussion.
Yeah.
You know, it would-
There's nothing active as far as new.
Well, there's more and more multi-family type things coming out on Mass Road.
But
They're hooked in.
they're
okay,
already along
they're
the
gonna
shoreline.
be- Yeah,
According to our sewer ordinance approved for the town, if a resident is within
150 feet.
150 feet of an established sewer line, they're required to be connected.
okay, and how far out does the sewer line come?
It goes all the way, almost to Tim Redmond's house on High Street. It stops at the Mobile on North Mast.
Okay.
So the entire village is taken care
Covered.
of. It stops on Elm Street by the condos, the newer condos on the right on the water.
Oh, okay,
And then it goes, there's 6 miles from here to Manchester. It goes down the rail trail into Pinardville, and it actually
After.
comes out in the police station, the county farm, all of that. It actually goes through the field in front of the county nursing home, and out into Mass Road and catches
so
all
where
of
that
Pinardville.
growth is, it's already there.
Yes.
And just, we have a wonderful GIS database in our town, and you can, on the town's homepage, you can log on to the GIS database and you can turn on a layer for utilities. And you can see every sewer line and every storm drainage line.
So do you go up Bog Road too? or-
Nope, on New Boston Road, it only goes right before the first bridge, so it's only like
Oh, really?
300 feet down. Yeah.
Sure.
And
Grade-wise, it doesn't work.
Brad, I recall, I wasn't a commissioner at the time. I believe I might have been the selectman's representative of the sewer department, but we did a survey of potential customers that were in the Bog Brook area. And essentially, the question we asked them, are you aware if your septic system is not performing well or near being, near failure? And if the survey proved that a good number of the customers would benefit by connecting to the sewer department, then we would entertain doing so. But that particular survey said no, there was no need for us to rush in.
The only reason I asked is because of the development that's going on down
They're
opposite Bell
hooked in.
Road.
They're-
They're hooked in.
they're
Oh, they're
hooked.
gonna be hooked in?
Yeah.
Oh, I was
It's already,
wondering,
yeah, it's already in.
because that is one wet spot.
Yeah.
They actually come out, they hook in on Mountain Road. That's
Really?
where, that's the end of the line on Mountain. is where
Okay, so they
hook
come
in.
out by Pleasant,
Yep.
Pleasant one day,
Mhm.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, I was wondering about that.
We're going to make you experts on sewer department tonight.
I noticed you guys don't have any vehicles in here. Do you normally put them in the budget or?
Yeah, we have 2 vehicles, which are, we don't need to replace them,
They're relatively new.
relatively new, yeah.
And we have 2 full-time workers for those vehicles. And we have a full-time secretary.
If I could just add on the vehicles, because that is something that'll be newly added to the matrix in the future. The sewer commission previously had one vehicle and it was shared with DPW, so it was on the DPW matrix on CIP, because per the rules of CIP, the reason they're asking is all wheeled and titled vehicles need to be on here. So going forward, since they're brand new, we didn't see them in the next 6 years, we're gonna be adding those to the vehicle section, and you'll see them in the outer years for replacement. But one of them was purchased last
Last
year.
year.
just
She
like-
mentioned-
This is
Exactly why I
under
was
sewer,
asking.
they'll be under sewer then, and not
Yes.
DPW.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
The reason she
That's a new
mentioned
change.
new is that within the last year, the sewer department has officially stood up and is separate from the public works department. You can see that on the town's website. We have our own link of ages
A different
associated
color
with it.
shirt too.
I was gonna go with brown.
They're gray though, Ryan's
I would've
is
thought that
gray.
was fun.
I like gray because it's cool
Okay.
during the summer.
Okay. Are we all good? Any other questions? No? Okay, well, thank you very much for coming forward
Thank you.
tonight. We appreciate it. Apologize, I'm just gonna keep track of Charlotte. All right, so, welcome to the library.
Just be sure to introduce yourself. I apologize, I don't know your name off the top of my head.
Samantha Holman, I'm the chair of the Library Board of Trustees.
Thank you.
What page, please?
Yes, sorry. What page are we on, Danielle?
Three?
I'm quizzing you.
3.
Yes,
Bottom
three.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. And then Samantha, could you say your name again, please?
Samantha Holman, chair of the Library Board of Trustees.
Thank you. So page 3, we're looking at line 127. Starting at 127.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, so we do have some changes, as you can probably see. After further consideration, the board decided to reevaluate our approach to the building renovation and expansion project. So as you can see, we did vote to remove it from the matrix and instead are requesting the establishment of a capital reserve fund for which we would be the named agents with an initial deposit of $200,000 and annual deposits of the same amount each year thereafter.
With what goal?
So the intent is, as previously discussed, grant matching funds so that we could explore grants for which we need matching money, but also the continued capital needs of the existing building.
So out of the original matrix that we have, this is the major change by removing the addition and then establishing a capital reserve fund. When do you think, are you looking now at the possibility of doing an addition? Because I see this runs out for 6 years,
Yeah,
sometime
so,
beyond 6 years.
That's what it says.
yep, so it is in the memo section, I believe. I
Oh,
don't have a
yes,
copy
it
in
is.
front of me.
Sorry,
Says
I
project.
didn't read everything.
Yep, that's
Project
okay.
details unknown at this time, currently planned to fall outside the 24 to 29 scope.
So because, as I mentioned, we've made the decision to reevaluate the approach. The need for the space still exists, but in understanding the voters' decision back in March, we are trying to take a different approach. First, looking at the existing building. So what are the immediate needs in the existing building?
That's what I was just gonna-
Yep, so one of the projects that comes to mind is the windows, and I think we had discussed this the last time we were here. The windows are original to the historic building, so we would rather refurbish them than replace them. There is a grant available for that, but it requires a 50% match. So that's part of that initial $200,000 deposit that we're requesting. There are other ongoing capital needs for the library, maintenance items, paint, carpeting, exterior paint. Because it's a historic building, we would have to have someone like Tuttle, for example, come out and do that work. The side by the bank is quite high, and so there would need to be a lift involved, and that just drives up the cost of a project like that.
Ellen, go ahead.
Let's say this goes forward like this $200,000 a year. Does that mean that the public does or does not need to vote on what it's used for each year?
Good question, Danielle.
They have to vote on the deposit going in,
Right.
but as named agents, they do not need to vote. It would be similar to the school's building facilities capital reserve fund and the Bartlett facility capital reserve fund that are currently in existence.
Or the fire departments, they have a capital reserve fund.
Fire department has one for apparatus. That
see,
one's
that's
much
a
more
little different.
limited.
Okay.
But the school has two building ones currently that are similar to this.
So I guess what you're saying is, although the 200,000, it has to be a separate article on the warrant, right?
Yes.
For the deposit.
For the,
For the
each
deposit.
deposit.
But not what it's
So
used
you're
for?
looking to spend some of that money if it gets approved.
Correct.
The limitation on what the money will be spent on is going to come from how the actual capital reserve fund is established. So when it goes before the voters, they're gonna have to outline what that capital reserve fund can be used for. And that's the point at which the voters would either agree or disagree with the purpose of the fund.
The, Samantha, if you don't mind me adding, the Library Board of Trustees pulled the language from the school's creation of their maintenance capital reserve fund to see, what the language was around that, so that it could be clear for the intention that it's specifically for current building needs that already exist, nothing new. And then also for grant matching to complete those capital projects.
Go ahead.
One more thing just to add, as you see, line 127, the renovation project, in the memo line, it does have that note that Ellen mentioned, and that is specifically because of what's currently in your CIP handbook as a requirement for things in the outer years, that large projects be included on the matrix with a memo to signify that they're outside of the 6-year scope, but that way they don't fall off the radar.
Okay.
So rather than completely eliminating the line, we wanted to make sure that we removed the amount since that vote had occurred, but retained the memo so that we know that, as Samantha said, the need is still there and shown for planning purposes.
Okay. Okay.
If I may?
Yeah, go ahead.
You referred to the school, and the school has monies in the years in CIP, but it's for specific items, like the computer lab or the computer carts. Therefore, they're stated specifically what that money is for in each year.
But there
This
is
is like a blank check, and the public doesn't know what they're gonna do with it.
No,
Yeah.
I don't think that's the same one. Go ahead, Daniel.
I was just going to say the school has the same setup in that they're listing the projects. Once a capital reserve fund is established, utilizing the capital reserve fund would be the same way as the school, where they would put their projects that are above the $25,000 limit on the CIP, and it would go through the CIP and budget process the exact same way as the schools, and it would show that their planned offsetting revenue is from the CRF.
I guess I'll gonna have to speak further with Scott on this, because
Ellen, when they
it
were
strikes
first,
me as something different.
when the schools were first established, they were set up for the purpose of funding a broad array, if you will, of projects. But each year, however much money it's for, say 200, each year that it's put in, then that particular year, they have, okay, this is going towards these projects. So when it's first set up, it's not as specific.
ahead, Danielle.
I'm gonna look into that, because something doesn't seem right to me, so I'm just gonna look in further into that. I'll just wait.
So, I know you're going to look into it, but just one last
Doesn't seem right.
point on that to show it on the matrix itself. If you look at, say, page 7 of 12, for example, you're going to see on line 231, school project number 36 and 37, they show funding by CRF. And so those specific projects in that specific year show the amounts that would be proposed to be withdrawn from the CRF. And then when you get down to the revenue lines, there's a revenue line for CRF. At the point in which a CRF is being established, until the voters establish that and it actually exists, they can't list specific projects and unless they're planning to do something with it in 2024, which it sounds like it's still kind of up in the air, and that would come forward in their budget process if they had something specific to address, regardless of whether or not the CRF gets established. It's the transition
And how much
year.
each year is put into the school's CRF? I'm sorry.
Last year it was $250,000, and the year before that it was 200.
200, it just went up to
Yeah.
the 250.
Yes.
And then, as it comes up, that money goes into this.
As the money comes up to be used,
Right.
comes up for withdrawal, that's when it's shown by specific
I
project.
appreciate your refreshing my memory, because until you just said the change.
Yeah.
It wasn't in my head. And we are, I don't see it real quick, but, so it's still going forward as 250 each year going into the CRF. And then,
Each year, the budget committee has to vote on what they would approve for the school's CRF, so.
right,
Ellen, last year Scott proposed 300,000 and the
and then
budget
came
committee
down.
dropped it to 250,000.
Yes, I remember that when you mentioned that. And then, so that's listed in here somewhere. Okay, and then as the out year, because it must be listed for every year, and then also listed, so whether it's school or library or fire department or whomever, the amount going into the CRF and the amounts being used for specific tasks, they're not being double listed, are they?
No. Is the CRF money each year being shown in the budget itself?
Well, it's not shown on here.
No, not on here, but
Right.
in the town budget or school budget.
It would, as a separate warrant article, yes. We do, as part of our budget process, have to show separate warrant
But
articles.
it's not in this, in
Correct.
CIP.
Correct.
The
The only,
expenditure of what's planned to be used for
For
is
the-
in here.
for the
And
following
then
year.
listed as CRF funding source.
Right.
Got
Go
it.
ahead.
Thank you, thank you.
that's correct, and that's specific for the school where they don't have, they already have an established balance, so they're drawing from that CRF regardless of whether or not their deposit gets approved. Does that make sense?
Because the balance is already there.
Because the balance already
Yes,
exists.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for the time to remind me.
Sure, it's good for all of us to know.
Yeah.
Jim, go ahead.
I have a question. This is being put into a TRF for the ongoing projects. So at some point, I assume trustees will come forward with a large project, whether they call it a addition or replacement. Will these funds then be usable or at least countable from matching grant purposes for the big project?
I think that depends on in establishing the CRF, the language that is used in establishing it.
Okay. But I assume that might be a purpose of this.
That might be a killer to the CRF.
That's a political question. We're not the
I always
political.
have
That's
those.
not the proposed intention of
Okay.
it, if that's what you're
Yeah.
asking. That's not,
Okay,
No,
Never
that's
mind.
not the
Correct me if I'm
intent.
wrong. Okay.
Nope, you're correct. That is
Okay.
not the intention.
okay.
And will the public know when
Well,
we're
it
voting
sta-
on this,
it states
what
it-
it's intended?
The warrant article has to state the purpose of the CRF.
the fund has to explicitly state what it can be used for, and it cannot be used for anything outside of that,
Without a-
even to
right.
dissolve unless the voters vote for that to happen.
Okay. Crowd will now sing for us.
So I know when the library first made their presentation, they stated that they don't receive any town impact fees.
That's correct.
Why is that?
I don't know why.
Because there were never any established for the library.
Do you know? I don't remember why not.
I think the library, the ability to collect impact fees for a library came later on, and it was just never reviewed at that point, I guess.
And therefore, it might be time for the planning board to spend another endless evening looking at that.
They're going to talk about it at their next meeting
Oh,
next
yay.
week.
Oh, yay.
The last time this came up, someone suggested that the library trustees request. I
So,
think that
Yes.
they be part of it. I think that was the last
However,
time.
it
I think
doesn't,
Samantha can help.
impact fees, if you're deficient to begin with, you cannot collect impact fees for something until you've made up that deficiency. So they're sort of caught in the middle right now.
so the trustees have requested that the planning board consider the library in their next impact fee study. But like Joanne mentioned, part of the challenge is that the existing building is deficient. So way that we would be able to spend those impact fees gets a little tricky.
I got lost on that. So that you can't get impact fees to repair the existing
No,
facility?
it's the additional
Oh.
capital needs created by the growth
Oh.
that you're collecting the fees for. You
Interesting.
can't use it to backfill the
Right.
town's other
I
obligations.
didn't realize that. Okay, well, that's good to know.
Because otherwise it's a disguised tax, and
Hmm,
you can't do that.
okay.
Or not a disguised tax.
A pretty upfront tax, right?
But-
Derek Horn attended one of our recent meetings and gave us a full explanation of impact fees, and so we're working on coming up with a list of projects that would be sufficient and applicable to use those fees.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, does anyone have any other questions for Samantha? No?
No,
Okay.
major change, but makes sense.
It is a big change,
Both
yeah.
politically.
Mhm. Thank you for coming forward and presenting this tonight.
Thank you for having me.
So we have a lot on our plate. Do you want to do the administrative first and just approve the minutes?
So moved. You gotta take the bite.
Sure, right, yeah. So, but my question is, did everyone receive the minutes either, oh, they were emailed?
I got them electronically, but I haven't had a chance to look at them.
Okay. Do we want to take the time to look them over now? No?
I'll make a motion to approve the July 6, 2023 minutes.
I'll second.
All right. Any comments on the July 6th meeting minutes? None? Let's vote. All those in favor say aye.
Right.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'll abstain.
Abstain? Do we have the majority then? We do. Yep. Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the June 29th, 2023 minutes.
I'll second.
Okay, all those comments? Let's take a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain?
Abstain.
Okay. All right, those two are approved.
Something you learn as chair is you never ask, did you read them? You say, did everybody have a chance to read them? You can also, yes, we had a chance to read them,
Yes, we had
whether
the
we read
chance
them
to
or
read
not.
Okay, so Danielle, do you want to try to take the handbook first, or?
Sure, yeah, whichever preference you'd like.
Yeah, let's leave the matrix for the end.
This is what we had yesterday, right?
Yes.
Again, I haven't had a chance to.
This,
I've been busy.
understood. Okay.
Okay, so before you, there are appearingly two copies, but that's because one is a red line version that shows every strike through, every movement, every format. The other copy is what would be considered a clean copy of the proposed draft. So the red line, you can see certain things changed. Obviously on the front you're seeing changes in the logo and the dates. Secondly, a table of contents was added to help people find their way through the handbook. So part of what we did was essentially take items that were already in this handbook and try to reformat them in a way where it'd be more readable at a glance. So, this first section here is taking some items and putting them into bullet format instead of paragraphs, a minor change in wording. Then as you move along, it kind of skips ahead to page 7, where we thought some clarifying language. Before it said, recommends the capital projects to implement one above, referencing item number 1. Instead, we thought it might be clearer to just say, implement projects as described above, so that people aren't wondering, do they mean page 1, if there's no section numbers, so kind of what is that in reference to? So we did that throughout. Currently, the capital improvement project is for all projects that are a minimum of $25,000. That is correct, and it has been that way for some time, since at least 2018, but I do believe further back than that. I don't know if the committee thinks that there should be any change to that or not recommended, but we kept it the same, just made it bold, so it's easy to spot.
Is that something we discuss separately? Or?
It's up to the committee.
Is that something you want to discuss?
Well, 25,000 X years ago was different than 25,000 now.
Right.
And the purpose of this committee is not to microanalyze what I would call routine or operational expenses, even if we define them as capital, but look at large items that really are intended to meet capital needs. Now, the argument can be the small items in some become significant if they're not done, but do we really need to look at a $25,000 expenditure? Now, we see it on the school side, they get pretty micro in the presentation. Do they need to?
Do we have a number in mind to increase that too?
Well, you could justify it, you just take the inflation rate from then to now and say, well, we're doing the dollar equivalent, present dollars, and justify it that way. I mean, does it really change what we do? No. Does it change the amount of time this administration has to spend preparing this? Probably. And that's a cost, so.
Jim, to your point, just in my head, I was like, well, what if we changed it to 50,000, let's say? How many projects are on here between 25 and 50,000, just to see?
That wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
It's not
Enough
a
to worry
lot,
about it.
but I'm just kind of, you know, skimming through and
Yeah,
taking a
I
look
put
at that.
exactly no thought into this, as you can tell. So.
But I don't know if that's statutory, is it?
Okay. It is not.
Who decides that, the planning board?
The planning board decides as part of their handbook.
Thank you.
To that point, you do have on page 8, just following the mention of the limit, there are certain exceptional items that they call for that are to be included regardless of whether or not they hit that limit. So that's going to include wheeled vehicles, motorized equipment with anticipated life at least 3 years, costs or obligations to conduct, prepare, or present surveys. If that total is at least 10,000, that may be another item to consider raising that limit. I mean, maybe you bring 1 to 50 and 1 to 25, or whatever the committee feels is sufficient. And then projects that come into immediate compliance with state or federal law or court order, obviously can kind of bypass the CIP, but would be put on the CIP project. The only ones, that would bypass the process would be imminent danger, which is specifically described in the paragraph below that was already in existence in the handbook. But that one does have a limit as well. So a few limits to kind of consider if you're thinking about the structure and what the recommendation might be for adjusting those limits.
Now, you said there's no RSA that refers to what the limits
To
should
dollar
be.
amounts, no.
The dollar amounts, right. Is this what we have now consistent or comparable to most other areas that have CIP that are about our size?
It varies greatly from community to community based on how they choose to plan. It also is something that you need to consider, like you said, our size. We're the 14th largest community in the state, so we're going to have probably higher costs or capital needs than maybe a much smaller town would be. So we could certainly try and pull some of the limits from some of the other communities. I don't know, how recently theirs were evaluated either.
But just a thought, that's all.
Yeah. But we do see that, just kind of like fund balance, they vary so much from one community to another, regardless of community size sometimes.
Well, I think, I hear what you're saying, Brad, but I don't know if that's really necessary, because just as a committee, again, I'm just using 50,000 as a number, how much of an impact would that make to this matrix? It's a really limited amount, but if in the process of updating our handbook is to help, not simplify, but lessen the oversight on this process for the department heads and the amount of paperwork that they're doing, it would be a slight help to them. So I think I personally would be in favor of, upping it a bit and seeing how that process goes, because if it's for this upcoming year, they're still gonna throw it to the budget, it's still gonna be hit by a lot of other committees. Sorry.
No,
Go ahead.
that's totally fine.
Okay, the next thing,
Okay, hold on.
obviously, if we're looking to up the dollar amount, other than the exclusions or the exceptions, that would have to be done by the planning board, right?
All of these changes would be done by the planning board. This committee would be making a recommendation of which version of the draft to put forward for planning board to consider.
Okay, thank you.
Ellen?
Just a quick looking through counting,
Mhm.
and most of the items I saw real quickly are on the school side. It's like 25 items that wouldn't be on here if it went up to 50,000.
Okay.
And most of it's on school side. I'm not sure in my mind what difference that makes to our functioning as CIP, but the point made is those who prepare all that, all the paperwork and all that, would make a big difference to, and for our planning purposes. I'm not sure how that helps us. So if someone could clarify that for me as to why we would do that, how does that benefit this whole process?
I think it would give Scott a lot more time, like, so that he wouldn't have to put all these things in here. Because I think you're right, the majority of things that are in here that are under 50,000 are public works vehicles, which have to be included anyways, so they can't get out of it, and small things for the school, like cleaning equipment.
Computer stuff,
Yeah, computer stuff.
flooring.
Yeah, everything else is, you know,
The core switches, and there were quite a few. Most of it's school stuff. I think it was around 25, real quick.
That's okay, Danielle can go.
Yep, Daniel?
I was just going to comment that the schools projects too, I mean, they continue to plan for those on their side, just like they would with, maintenance of all the buildings, light bulbs getting switched out and everything else. But the school wouldn't have to be completing this process individually, is I think what I'm hearing, but also the school has been talking about doing some kind of combined purchases, leasing, and other combinations that are going to bring things up to a higher limit that would make those, kind of consolidate those projects into one line on the CIP rather than 18 lines and 18 submission
Which would
pages.
bring it up to that other level.
Right.
Whatever that level.
Right.
I also think about this in terms of, we use it as a planning matrix to try to balance the future budget concerns of the town so that we don't have, $10 million one year and $2 the next. So that's how 25,000 seems small when you think about that. I mean, can we absorb a hit of those, say, 10 items or not? Like, I think $50,000 seems reasonable. It just feels low to me, and 50 is kind of an arbitrary, like, just jump up that number. But also I think I like Kelly's suggestion of, well, we could always shift it and then see how that goes. So, Jim, you had a thought. Your face
Well,
says
yeah,
you
no, I
have
think it's ridiculous for us to be spending time on small items. Why?
Right.
What does it accomplish?
Is 50 enough? 75?
Yeah, do 50. I mean,
50? Yeah.
pick a number, but it's just silly.
The one about the $10,000 for studies, I mean, I don't know any study that's below $10,000. I would see that at like
Yeah,
20 to
well,
30.
Well, yeah, who cares if they have to do it $10,000? I mean,
Right.
somebody cares, but why should we? And you could use a threshold on vehicles. Do we really care if DPW has to buy another two-wheeled trailer to tow behind its pickup truck? No.
Right.
I mean, unless we really want to micro.
Well, because right now we have all
definitely,
vehicles, right?
yeah.
All
We
wheeled
had a
vehicles.
very long conversation about lawnmowers a few years back too, for
Yeah, I mean,
multiple
I mean,
meetings.
it's just, what's the purpose of this process? And it's to make sure capital needs are met, but not to micro.
But to your point, what's the definition of capital?
That's right.
It's no longer $25,000.
Yeah, correct.
Agreed.
And I would put a threshold in vehicles, so. 'Cause-
Do we want to make a motion?
Can we do that?
Yeah, we can
recommendation?
Can I,
recommend.
real quick, Danielle, would you mind citing the portion about vehicles specifically? Do
You
have
mean
it
where
up?
it is?
Yes,
Page 8.
thank you.
And we could change that. We could either put a dollar amount on the vehicles,
Yeah.
say $50,000.
Yeah. So that's gonna pick up most.
I do know that, I think the rationalization between including things like lawnmowers and things like that is because they are on a rotationary purchasing cycle. So we kept it on there to get kind of like a full-scale picture of things that would have to be purchased that are vehicles by
Okay.
definition.
Yeah, okay.
But,
But so are pencils, they're not vehicles, but they're on a schedule to replace, so.
no, I'm not saying we
Yeah.
shouldn't do it. I was just giving you the
Sure,
rationale behind
nice.
why those little things were included. So I personally don't have an issue taking it off because I don't think it's going to make much impact to our overall cost year over year.
So if we took the whole bullet item out, then it would just be any CIP over 50,000, including vehicles, right? Right, so now we have all vehicles, if we took that whole bullet out, or do we modify that bullet to say any vehicle or over 50,000?
Or over some threshold,
Or
whether
some,
it's 50.
right.
Yeah, I think it would be good probably to leave the bullet in with the threshold, just so that
Okay.
we don't lose sight of kind of the history of it,
Okay,
personally.
okay. Brad, you agree?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Does someone want to make a motion to suggest these things?
I make a motion that we recommend to the planning board that we stop wasting our time on small items. You can editorially correct mine, and have a $50,000 threshold. And on vehicles, if you wish to, this is for discussion purpose, you could have a $35,000 threshold if you think 50 is too much. I just don't know if they're gonna, planning board's gonna swallow it, knowing some of them, but put some dollar threshold. I'm coming out of my motion to ask a question. Should it be 50 or should it be some lower amount?
I mean, just taking a quick glance at this matrix, I'm just kind of eyeballing how many are under $50,000, right? One, two,
Two trailers.
Trailers. I think that 50 feels safe to me because, you know, like the cruisers and yeah, like you said, the
So the cruisers are
Dump
3
truck.
cruisers, and they combine them because that's their replacement schedule.
But each one of them's
right.
But to your point, Jim, it's most of them are for Parks and Recreation, I'm sorry, Public Works,
Like the smaller
the
trailers.
smaller things.
Okay, well, I'll recommend add to my motion vehicles with 50,000 or more.
Okay. And can we change the study from 10,000 to something, 20,000 at least?
25,000, some.
25,000, let's change the 10 to 25,000 for studies.
What was the overall limit?
And then the overall limit was 50.
Okay, so vehicles
Both
50,
vehicles.
overall at 50, and study 25.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So you
I
still
will
second?
still second all of that.
Okay, okay, let's take a vote. All those in favor of the motion on the table, say aye.
Just for
Motion
clarification,
as
hate to-
edited.
Yep, go ahead.
this, although we're making a motion to vote,
25.
this is to put it forward to the planning board.
Correct.
We're just an
Right.
Recommendation.
we're an advisory board to the planning board. They hold all power. We're just gnomes.
So Gail, we need to word that as we make a recommendation to the planning board to make those changes. To $50,000 for the vehicles, $25,000 for surveys, and then $50,000 under any other CIP.
And we could say in the motion, you can dress it up that to reflect in part the effects of inflation since over the last X years. And stop wasting our time.
Okay, so statutory ways, did we just vote? All those in favor say aye, we did that. Okay, any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, all right, so we're good. So that motion carries. All right, so then do we also have to vote separately on the just overall general edits? Do we need a vote to recommend these changes?
Yeah, I think we should.
The handbook?
Yes.
Yes.
Can I just go back to the page 8, please, quickly? There's 2 additional sections below, addressing imminent danger, threat. Danielle, I'm assuming that amount would be changed
Oh, right
based
there,
on
too.
what we just did. And then below that, routine and annual reoccurring expenses, it says $25,000 and/or 5 years.
What does that mean? And/or is the place where people who can't make up their minds to hide.
My question is, do you want to keep that 5 years?
And
in
should
here?
it be or, because what does and add to that? I'm an anti-and or, by the way.
CIP is not for recurring expenses or maintenance.
It is to some degree. I mean, that's what you were just saying with the computer parts or some of those,
The
you know, the
schedule.
replacement schedule for the vehicles.
But
But this is saying what our projects are not capital improvement projects, even when their individual or combined cost and/or duration is.
so does that mean buying reams of paper, very expensive paper? Let's entertain me, it costs $25,000, or we buy it for at least 5 years. We have to put it in CIP? Well, that's what it says.
Well, I think the key is that it currently says, which are the mission or normal duties
Yeah.
are not capital improvements, even when their combined costs may combine to be hitting the $50,000 limit and/or the 5-year limit that are,
Because that goes back to page
Right.
7,
It's
right? Our
actually-
master definition,
right.
which are projects that are at least $25,000. So on page 7, that one would change to 50 before external factors and has an extended expected life of 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where the 5 years comes from, and that's not an and/or, that is a 5 years.
Right.
So maybe just revise that sentence to match what it says before.
So what is this, I don't want to bog down in this, but what in the world does this paragraph on page
So-
8 say then?
So it's really, I think what it's really trying to do is call out the fact that you don't need to put these on the CIP, even if their combined cost or duration would make it hit that
These are
CIP
the,
definition.
these are the exceptions.
Right,
Okay. That's fine.
but I do think updating the limit there would be required to match.
Yeah, okay.
And then maybe if you just match the wording from page 7, so the expected life of at least 5 years, and then that would take care of that and/or. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. So we can't accept this changes as whole because on page 14, we have the worksheet and department submission form. And I take it, Danielle, you have given us information that you want to discuss the different forms.
So at the last meeting, the committee had made a motion to recommend that form be completely withdrawn from the process, which at first, I think Joanne and I were both agreeing was quite, logical and would help make the process more efficient. The concern is as we started pulling together the handbook process and looking at the matrix, we started to realize that there could be concerns about, are we going to get the correct information from the departments to put on the matrix if they don't submit anything to us in writing except for maybe an email, which some department may include or forget a piece of information. So part of in the handbook, what I did was I added some bullet points on page 10 that talk about the submissions of projects.
I saw that.
And I itemized the items that we currently have on the matrix, listing them out to say, your submission must include all of these details so that we don't miss something when we're trying to fill in the matrix. But then Joanne and I were looking at it, and Joanne found some really great examples of what other communities are doing to have a more streamlined form. Instead of a 2-page form that we have that requires a signature and everything else, she pulled some examples from both Bedford and Milford, and those were handed out to you tonight. The sheets from Bedford, we liked how they were 1 page. Each project is a single page, and Joanne pulled multiple examples so you could see kind of how that would look for vehicles. It can still fit on 1 page, like we do now, but almost give you a mini version of the matrix, which is actually what Adam does when he sends his submission to us, and the same that the school does, is they send us their mini matrix. And so we could have that as additional information, say on a 1-page project sheet. And then on the other projects, whether it's a large project or a small project, you still see that there's plenty of space by having this kind of format at the top where there's like a summary of the headers, the pieces of information that have to be captured, and then the rest of the page is really reserved for that additional description. And part of that also came to mind as we were reviewing the handbook, and we noted that the handbook actually references that the document should be submitted in writing to preclude something from being too vague and just saying, we're going to do a locker room project, for example. Well, what does that mean? Are we talking moving walls? Are we talking paint? Like, so having a description would still be, I think, very useful, but it would cut the sheets in half just by having one page instead of two for every single project. And then we'd be able to capture all of the information needed in a standard format so nobody misses a piece of information that's needed for the
And
matrix.
information is in different places. It's
Right.
the same place.
Right, we're not trying to scan an email to figure out if the total's at the top or the bottom, it's all in the same format.
But that's not materially different other than one page from our current form.
Correct.
So, yeah, have you really accomplished anything other than saving one piece of paper for each submission? Which I suppose I could say is a good thing.
I think it simplifies it from the department's perspective, and if they just continue running a matrix of their own, it shouldn't be a difficult submission. I mean, I think it helps. It lessens the amount of typing and PDFing and emailing that they're doing to do that. It's just a guess, I mean.
Yeah, I'm in favor of that.
It also allows us the ability, at least I was thinking, of making a fillable PDF form where you can have like the funding source as a drop down of options, what funding sources they're picking, you know, is it tax, bond, et cetera. It allows them to kind of put information right at the forefront that the committee's handbook says is required, like, is this tied into the master plan? I think some of my discussion with department heads, some of them had said, I don't know. But it kind of helps bring that to their forefront when they're thinking about their project, and they're kind of keeping that as part of their scope on their radar. But making a fillable PDF, hopefully that would really cut down on the time and still get all the pieces of information, and then we would be able to provide the matrix from the prior year, their sections, so they can just update the matrix and not have to drop in every piece of information.
I think we could definitely improve on our form. I mean, if we just want to compare, like, very much apples to apples, the town of Bedford has like a voting machines, that's their very first one, and we have a voting machines form in here. And so, I mean, you can just see that our form, like, we don't need this whole table in here at all. It's under the white tab for administration and other. It's the very first one. But there's a lot, there's obviously very different, they have different information than we do. But I definitely think we can make this much smoother.
You want to make a motion to recommend a revision of the form?
Is that, so maybe we don't need to decide what the form's going to look like tonight. What the recommendation could be is that we agree to let the town staff reconfigure the form so that they become easier to work with. I wish we had someone with data knowledge who could transfer these boxes right to the Excel table, because I know it can be done. I'm not smart enough to do that. But that would be amazing if they could fill in a fillable PDF and then dump that right into Excel.
No, they're not specialized enough.
I don't know that, but, so go ahead, Colin.
Danielle did outline and Joanne, all submissions must include, and I think that's the recommendation we can make, as opposed to recommending a specific format, but that those things be included for validation and processing purposes for finance when we're putting this together.
I think if we have a form, though, I think there are people who are going to appreciate that more. With the, like you said, maybe the fill-in. So all this information is just like, you could just type it in really briefly.
But we can approve.
Sorry, I thought you just said you didn't want to approve a form. Did I misunderstand you?
What I was saying is I think instead of us trying to figure out what needs to be included here at this meeting tonight, I was saying that, yeah, I think we should have a form. Sorry if that was misstated. I just felt like maybe the people who work with the forms know better than me how much easier a different form would be, covering all of this information.
Gotcha. All I'm
Yes.
saying is I think we should move this forward for recommendation because that's what they told us they need included.
Right. I agree
Okay.
with that.
Maybe
I just
we're saying
didn't
the
want to
same
say,
thing,
hey, Rick, you need to give me a report. It has to have all this, because it could be really it might even be worse than, harder than trying to fill out the forms we gave them before. So I guess I'm saying, I would leave it up to you to determine what the form should look like.
Okay.
Kelly, where were you looking at this?
It's on page 10.
Okay.
So I guess what I was saying is they did tell us what they needed and it's this.
Right, but in some sort of format.
So I think just hearing you both say the same
Same
thing,
thing, okay.
but I think to kind of merge the two together, I think Kelly's saying that she'd like to maybe see someone, or maybe she's intending to make the motion to have these items that we drafted included on the new form.
Yes.
And then leaving the formatting of the form, like you said, up to staff to develop a one-page version, which we will add into the back to replace the existing.
When you look at our current
Got it.
forms, they were written back when people were writing quill pens and would fill in blanks. Yeah, I'm appalled. as
You're
I look
talking
at
you're
that.
talking about my era?
Well, I mean, you just look at, it's like from one to the other, it's,
And you have to go through and check which one of what 5 choices. You can't do that on a computer.
Well, look at us making improvements.
So I agree, Kelly,
No,
if you
don't-
want to
don't-
form one like that
don't-
into a
don't-
motion somehow.
Don't
Ellen?
tell Tim,
I'll
the
move that,
chair of the planning board, he'll squelch it.
based on the discussion, that our staff create a one-page form that would be used for the CIP process, and that we recommend to the planning board the adoption of the use of that new form. Based on our discussion, I don't want to get into details. Does that make sense to
Well,
people?
I think we can authorize them to come up with a usable form based on their.
Before we go forward and vote on this, first of all, I want to thank Danielle and Joanne for all the work they put into
Oh,
this.
absolutely.
Yes,
Yes.
That's my statement.
thank you. Does someone want to second
I'm not sure what the motion is, but yes. Yeah, no, we're recommending a new form, and with the information that's presented in the revised, what do you call this, handbook?
that?
Was there a second?
I don't hear a second.
oh, I thought
You
it
made
was
the motion,
second.
Jim seconded.
Jim seconded.
Jim seconded Ellen's motion.
Oh, that's nothing.
I'll
Okay,
second
Jim seconded it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstain. Okay, so then, unless anyone has any massive heartburn over the changes in the handbook, can we make a recommendation to approve the handbook changes to the planning board?
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
Jim moved. Ellen seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstain. Okay, awesome. Moving on, so now we're gonna arm wrestle over the matrix. So tonight's goal is to decide if we feel like we need to make any shifts or changes to the matrix that is in front of us tonight. So we have no doubt this is the matrix that we have. And I think Danielle was gonna make some comment about how it has been altered. Kelly, go ahead.
I have I don't know if you saw this, but to move the software refresh from IT to an urgent priority.
Okay, hang on. Before we actually go that far, I know that this has been reformatted. Daniel, can you sort of explain the reformatting to us before we get into it?
Sure.
Hold that thought.
So, I'm going to jump ahead to page 4, because that gives us a good example. Part of what we did was, there's 2 funding source columns, and that's partly due to the way the school needed to note their section. So keeping the columns lined up, we said, okay, let's make use of that space. And where bonds are proposed, I've highlighted in yellow, so at a glance as you're flipping through the page, you can at least spot them. The next change you're going to see is the next page over, page 5. What you have are the traditional lines that you've seen in the past, where you have the total projects and vehicles as their gross appropriation amount. Then you're going to see the offsetting revenues for those and essentially a net project cost. But then below that, the section in yellow represents items that are flagged to be put forward for other financial mechanisms such as bonds or leases that would, be spreading payments out. So you can see both versions kind of side by side, The top one, line 181, shows you what that same project total would be without the cost of any of the proposed bond projects. Then instead, the second line down, 182, provides you with what that proposed bond would be.
The payments each
The payments,
year?
the principal and interest payments. And that gives you a new total line on line 183. So you can see the difference between the gross appropriation version on 179 and the proposed equalization from financing being kind of side by side to that. And then at the very back, so that was done for both the town and the school, but if you look at pages 11 and 12, page 11 is the debt schedule that you're used to seeing. We added a note at the bottom that just calls out the fact that this does not include any of the newly proposed items to be paid by bond or lease, but rather this only shows you what the voters have approved, what the commitments are. And the last page shows you a detailed breakdown of the projects. Ooh, I apologize, I'm seeing our copier did a print error here. It's skipping letters. I'll flag that for IT. And send a revised one for you all. But what that last page is a summary page which provides to you the breakdown of what's been proposed to be bonded or leased. Orange, to stay consistent with what Scott had handed out at the last meeting, orange is for lease, light blue is for bond, and then the brighter blue is your totals. So I know that's hard to read where random digits have been skipped.
These are the additional amounts. The prior page were the existing, and these are the proposed?
Yes.
Yeah, on page
Correct.
12.
And so these proposed amounts are captured in your CIP totals in those light yellow sections at the bottom of the project costs. So this just tells you, when we say the proposed bond for 2024 is, So 168,000 is the proposed bond amount when we remove the bond projects from the gross appropriation and replace it with its proposed bond payment. But to make sure we don't lose sight of what that gross appropriation is, it tells you the amount being financed would be really a grand total of 32 million across the 6 years. And they each start at different years, so that's part of why we wanted to provide this breakdown for you.
The last one.
And so when we go to page 10, that is town projects, town vehicles, and school, broken down the same way.
That's everybody, yep.
That's all.
Worked out the same way, so in the bond projections, I used the exact same interest rate that Scott had used so that we could compare projects apples to apples, knowing that rates are set at the time of bonding. But we have different terms based on what's being proposed. So if a project, say, is a police station, I'd be using the assumption that it's a 30-year bond, whereas a pool is 4 million, that would maybe only be a 10-year bond. So those different assumptions are called out on that very last page, page 12. I'm gonna reprint this last page, just in black and white directly from here to across the hall, if that's okay, because the skipped digits on this last page are gonna make it really difficult to read, and I didn't realize that had occurred with the printer.
I'm just a little with the school, because they had all of their information bonded out. I think it's really interesting to see it with the town, like especially, like if we look at Parks and Rec, just for example,
What
their.
page?
Parks and Rec, page 4.
But I guess on 5, when knowing that their pool is in 2024, when you look at their proposed CIP like that, that big red number of 6,934,000, but then when it's bonded out, so looking from line 179 to 183, it drops almost
Significant.
like $3 million with it being bonded out.
Mhm.
But with this school on page 9, I don't see that it, maybe I'm not looking in the correct spot, but the numbers are the same.
So that, yes, that's because when the school did their matrix, they chose to completely eliminate the bond amounts of the project gross appropriation amounts. So the matrix that had been provided by the school actually brought those totals above the gross appropriation. So you're not seeing the bond itself. So if you look at the page before it here, page 8 of 12, you'll notice that anything that says bond in column G has no numbers at all, because he completely eliminated those gross amounts and included it only in his bond calculation. So he's shown it differently. On the town side, I've chosen, based on the committee's discussion, to show the gross appropriation of the project put forward versus if it were financed successfully through bonding, whereas the school has chosen to show a summary that is, without those items at all, just kind of going on that assumption of the bond payment being approved, as in they would only be doing, I think the idea is they'd only be doing those projects if the bond's approved, or they'd be smaller projects that would be coming forward in the budget.
But your totals at the end of the section do include the bond cost.
Right.
On line
Yeah.
213.
Yeah, and again, that's because they chose to move their bonding totals above the gross appropriation. I can recalculate it, but I would have to go back to an earlier version of the matrix and fill back in every project that had been eliminated, and I simply ran out of time for that.
But we could look back at our, and
You could.
see what each
Yeah, you
what do
could
call
put
them,
the two-
projects, but,
You could put two of them side by side.
right.
Also, to compare apples to apples, you could compare the school section to the yellow bonded section on the town side, and those would be the
I see.
same. And then page 10 of 12 is just the totals for everything that we see. The problem is lines 322 to 324 don't have those gross appropriation amounts from the school. They had been eliminated, so I can pull an earlier version.
But the yellows do. So 326, 327, 328 do.
That combines everything from both entities the same way.
Okay, right.
Okay,
So if you're looking at leveling out that bottom line, line 328 still remains the bottom line.
Okay, what's my question?
Do you mind if I run across the hall and grab that page that did
Yeah, go
not
right
print
ahead.
clearly?
Before you do that, just one quick point. This is editorial. I've noticed it says new centralized, this is in the memo section. New centralized pool originally installed in the late 1990s. It should read 1970s.
Oh, okay.
What page, please?
4.
Page 9.
Page 4.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'm
Line
sorry,
148.
page 4, yeah. It's over in the memo section.
What line?
Line 148.
It should be,
so.
in what year?
1970s.
Well, for somebody, a voter, it's
No, it
20
makes
years
a
is a
big
big,
difference.
big difference.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you want to build a little pool? It's only 30 years old.
So with all of that being explained to us, Kelly had started the discussion, I'm sorry I interrupted you, about moving something.
May I ask, was that based on cost or your or need? Or both?
Can you go back again
No,
and say what?
let me phrase the question that we look at is, do we move items that are movable to even out tax burden over years. Or we move things because there's a greater need that we feel.
That's what she
And
said,
or,
she had a great and/or.
we combine the two.
Right. So this one, I was just moving the priority, they've noted as necessary.
Because
but
you
it
think it
isn't-
has a higher
It
priority.
is in fact
Yeah,
urgent.
It's not a
yeah.
cost issue, it's a
Right.
need issue, okay.
What line is it in the matrix? Did you happen to find that? Oh, sorry.
I just
It was
going through my
police,
notes,
right?
Police.
you know.
Yeah.
I was just kidding
Would
myself.
have been administrative town projects, it's line, page 4.
This just replaces page 12.
Line 1,
Because page 12 is
37.
missing digits.
Page 4 is a hot page. It's on page 4.
Okay. And so the suggestion is to move the 280,000 to,
No, just
No.
priority.
oh, to up
Priority.
the priority.
Yeah, I was just going through priority.
Okay, so update
Okay,
it from
what
a 2
page,
to a 1.
what did we just do, what page?
On page 4,
Okay.
line item 137, Kelly was suggesting that we change the department priority from a 2 to a 1
Let's see.
Well, for the CRP priority, yeah.
for the CIP priority.
CIV no, I
I'll
can't say
second the
word.
motion.
Okay,
This is page 1.
Okay, CIP priority will be a 1, and the school still is gonna remain a 2.
For what?
Department, yes, will remain at 2.
Okay.
oh, department renewal.
That's on an
to CIP.
admin project.
What did we just change? What line?
We've increased your pay for this committee.
137,
There you go.
Doubled it.
Yep,
CIP priority,
yes.
column D, that's going to be in 1.
Okay.
Did we move the 600?
Oh, we didn't move the dollar amount.
Right.
Okay.
Of course not.
There was another one we flagged,
Spoken like a true banker.
which might have already been moved.
It was
I
police
didn't take that
department,
one.
it's like 90,000.
Where are we now?
Sorry, I was so here it is.
Oh, yeah, that was the other one I asked
The other
about.
one was from records management, which the old one was line 97, so that's,
What,
It should be-
197?
no, I'm sorry.
It's 97.
Line
Yep,
97.
it's still 97.
Yep.
Line 97 on the matrix, page 3, thank you. We talked about moving this amount from 2027 to, we talked about moving it up 1 year, 2 years. We talked about moving it to 2025.
And what line is this, please?
This is the record management software.
97. So we talked about moving it from 2027 to 2025, which if we take a look at our magical bottom
That
line.
makes, that if you go to page 10, there's some reason to reduce 27 and add to the lower years, including magically 25.
Right. So then we would take the,
So I'd second that motion.
right, okay, so
So that was from 27 to 26?
25.
to 25.
To 25.
Yes, thank you.
Apologize, thank you.
So what does that do with the bottom lines on page 10?
Makes-
Move to 2025, right?
So it brings us up to around 60.
I think there's going to be a handful of changes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing them on the computer as we go, so at the end, if you'd like, I can tell you what the total is, or I can give them to you as we go.
Perfect.
Okay, whatever you prefer.
Whatever's easier. I'm sorry.
Yes, you're right. Are we voting on these individually, or are we
No,
voting them
let's-
all
let's
at
lump them.
the end? Okay.
Unless somebody has a great objection, just to.
What was the reasoning for this now?
So it came across as very urgent, records management software. When they gave the presentation,
But it also,
I could find it in my notes in here.
but it also helps to even out the disparity between 2027 and 2025.
Okay. Oh, okay.
right,
Yeah, like it
this is a
turns-
police request for records
The
management.
political question is, how much can you increase that bottom line over the next 3 years with budget, with voters who seem to have a different view of reality?
Yeah, so if we looked back at the information that they gave us,
Is that something you want to ramp up over time, Kelly? If you look at page, this is the political question that we try to avoid. Go to page 10.
go to page 10.
And last year was adopted budget is 2,600, 2,606,000. How we've identified needs that are in excess of that. How much can you ramp it up each year and still hope to get things passed? It's one thing to try to even out the remaining years. It's another to have a cliff that they have to climb up every year.
I think that a lot of it will be dependent on the department head's proposal for 2024 to the select board and the budget committee, because it's not necessarily an equal comparison to this proposed budget year, simply because of the scale and cost of very specific projects that are being proposed. And also, while I'm very happy that the school is proposing, I think this is the most CIP they've ever had, which is great for planning purposes. We're just kind of looking, I think, at the numbers just in a different way. So to your point, I don't know the answer to that question, but I think the way that it's communicated to those committees, and then in turn, both the school and the town at their own deliberative sessions communicate that information as well, is going to depend, I think, on a lot of it, so.
I was just going to add too that while the matrix shows us the 2023 adopted budget, it doesn't show us the 2022 because we have limited amount of space. And in 2022, that was $500,000 higher. It was about 3.1.
3.1?
So this, I think this current year happens to be a little bit low actually when we look at the last 5 to 10 years of CIP comparatively.
What was last year's CIP chair thinking?
I think it had more to do with the projects.
Yeah, and then the bonded amount down below, that's also a very different number.
Right.
I think it's going to take a lot of justification for some of the larger projects that will just be up to the voters. Like I foresee the pool being just up to the voters,
Sure.
and that
We can
being dependent on a lot
swim
of
in
it.
that swim.
Right,
If you can
purely by the nature of the scale of the project.
get all your exercise you need by looking at your cell phone, you don't need not that somebody ever said it.
So I don't know if I really answered that question.
No, you
but
did.
That's the answer to my question.
And so, my other thought, as I had kind of skimmed through this, was, so these numbers reflect a bond for the pool in 2024. The police department is out 2029. We've got a bond in 2026 for the fire station. Where else? There's the
Library.
Well, the library's not there anymore.
Madam Chair, if I
Go ahead.
may, page 12, which was replaced by the new printout, but isn't skipping any of the digits. It does give you the bonding and financing all together for town and school in one place.
Thank you.
And it breaks out the project so you can see the amount proposed on that bond, as well as when those payments would start and how they would gear up. So you'll notice that both the town and the school were consistent in that the first year, the year it would appear on the ballot, would be an interest-only payment, and the following years, you're actually seeing the amount of that principal and interest as calculated for that particular set of parameters. And on the left-hand side, it tells you, under the project name, what the assumptions were on the length of the bond, the interest rate that was used, and the items that are kind of off matrix. I left a 2030, which we wouldn't normally do, but for that discussion, you know, to show the police station's full payment would be more like a 1.1, 1.2 number because of their $20 million anticipated cost. And the library addition, while it no longer appears on the main matrix, I left it here in the bonding area so you could see the 7.2 million gross project amount, but they have no proposed bond amounts in the foreseeable future.
And so what I was sort of, thank you for laying this out this way, because so visually I was thinking, okay, we don't have like 3 bonds one year and nothing the next. So we actually, if this were to, go forward, so we'd have a bond in 2024 and then to vote on, and then we'd have another bond to vote on in 2026. And then the others pushed out to 2029. I think that's too far out to hit my brain. So that, and we've got, but it looks, so there's a bond also from the school in 2025.
Correct.
Okay.
So there's kind of one in each.
So they're sort of stepped out.
24, 25, 26, kind of each starting.
Good, that's what I was trying to.
So they're spread out, there's not
Yeah.
all, that's what
Not all
my
at once,
concern has
okay.
all been.
So I like that.
Every time I heard a bond, I said, what year?
I think when we make the presentation, Kelly's point is a good one. These numbers are gonna jump around because there's some large projects that have to happen sometime.
Right.
And then you have your normal fill-in, regular stuff that has to happen, so.
And also, I know that some of these projects are specifically, there's legwork being done to explore all of the grant possibilities that align with them. So any grants awarded would also go to pay the bond as well. So that's a huge variable of, this is just a guess, but the chances of them decreasing due to grants and things like that are well, knock on wood, that they're pretty high, but that's the hope.
So the sales pitch is, you gotta maintain your capital infrastructure. And occasionally you have to do a big project. It's just the reality of the town. So what we try to do is blend those two. Even out the tax burden as much as we can, but because the big projects do change the numbers, you just have to absorb those occasionally.
Right.
Kelly would say much rather.
And balance, I feel like we would have, sometimes we have voter fatigue where you've got too much at once, too many bonds, you're not gonna,
That's right.
they could just kick each other out.
Yeah, so
So-
the departments have spaced them out.
Right.
I thought that Scott had a lot of bond lease payments in the school matrix. So did he just combine them all together into?
I think so.
He did, and that
2025?
was part of my struggle of trying to reverse the matrix back to get some of the gross appropriations, because when I added up the gross appropriations, for instance, as an example, the second lease he had for HVAC and other, he put in a financed bond amount of 3 million, but when I went through and itemized all those projects together, they came up to like 2.2. So I think he was factoring in some additional, cost by the time you get to that project in 2025 and some other things. So he wanted to make sure his bond amount was sufficient, I think, to cover all of those projects that had been identified. But it's not a one-for-one comparison of the projects he put forward originally as a gross appropriation when he now is looking at the financing method.
That makes sense. So Kelly had introduced a change. So looking at this, we've got about 4.1, 6.2, 6.0, 6.7, 5.5. Do we feel like there's anything else that needs to be shifted around priority-wise? Or, as Jim pointed out, we have two reasons. One priority, one evening out. So 2024 is our lowest number, which is great. But as we went through these exercises, was there anything else that jumped out to someone that said, hey, we could shift this someplace? I mean, we're fairly even right now, except we've got a dip next year, but that's okay, because everybody likes dips. Unless we feel like there was something
this year.
urgent.
This year, and then like a medium, and then.
Right.
You should be increasing this something every year,
Right.
I think.
I mean, and right now, we go from 3.1, right, to, then that was 2.6, then 3.2. So we go from 3.2 to 4.1, so we are increasing stepwise. I mean, if there's anything we wanted to move from 2025. And I was just thinking, I don't remember something jumping out at me like, wow, that really feels like off. I don't know.
Yeah,
Did anybody else?
But with the move from the 738 change, that really kind of balances the totals out nicely.
Well, that bumps 2025.
Yeah.
That's an appropriation, actually. That's 730, so that puts
Right.
2025 up to.
Right, to 6.2, right. Yeah, I was kind of jumping.
I partially wish that we could move something from 2029 into 2028, but I also realize, so that those numbers also both started with 6 million as opposed to
Yeah.
5 and then 7.
Yeah,
but I can't think of anything to split.
Well, the good news is those are far enough out that I think we could say in our report that we recognize that need in our presentation. And so when we review it next year, those are years we'll focus more on, kind of kick the can down the road.
Yeah.
Because that's true, we're not.
Right, I mean, it's so far away.
We're not really focused on, we pretend to, but we're not. Our brains aren't that big.
Yeah, I was just skimming over, looking at the priorities and where things stand, and I don't see anything that jumps out at me that it would be good to move. Unless anyone else had something that jumped out at me.
There are a lot of, just in defense of kicking the can down the road, things like building costs and inflation, we just don't know. So it's the quasi-imaginary numbers.
And honestly, how many times we have projects on that get pushed out and pushed out and pushed out just due to everything.
Yeah.
So then the question is, are we satisfied with the matrix as it is presented to us?
It's a planning tool.
With Kelly's amendment.
With Kelly's change, right, of the 737.
Yeah, I'll move that
front
we
surface
approve the matrix as modified and recommend to the planning board its adoption.
I'll second it.
All right, we'll go with Ellen. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? All right, it carries.
And when do we go to the planning
So our
board?
last super fun job then is for volunteers to split up the presentation to the planning board so that I don't have to do it all. Although I could do a big enough
In fact,
hunk
if
of
you
it.
do it right, you do none of it, but I'm not gonna tell you that. That's my former chair.
Well, I'll give the kickoff and the introduction and go over it. Jim, remind me, how have we broken this up in the past?
We just took the.
How it's laid out?
And either ask for volunteers or you suspend the 13th Amendment and draft people.
Okay, so if everybody looks at our calendar, the very first page in our giant books, they're sort of broken into groups.
I think Brad should do parks, but that's a softball, so give him more.
Well, I've done it every year since, I can do administration too.
Do you want to do both of those? Okay. Thank you, Brad.
But
Ellen, would you want to speak for the school district? Is that you?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Anybody volunteer for Public Works and Sewer? Or Library, Police and Fire?
I don't care. Whatever.
Are we looking at
Do you
me?
have a-
I
do you have a
already
preference?
volunteered.
I don't have a
Kelly,
preference.
What would you want to do that's not politically dangerous for you?
Or none,
I
if you
mean,
don't want to?
I can do any of it, I don't have to.
Well, we don't need to throw you the hard stuff if you're gonna be tarnished by it.
I don't know
Obviously,
the hard stuff.
you know, it is.
I can
Yeah,
do,
right.
Like
I can do the library.
Or I'll do the library. I'm not up for re-election for anything, so I don't care.
Me neither.
Yeah.
All right, Jim, you want to do the library?
The library.
Um,
My mother has a library trustee.
Kelly, you want to do Police and Fire?
Sure.
Okay. And then Public Works and Sewer?
But you may do it if you want.
I can do it, I
I
don't
don't care, I
mind.
just.
I'll do Public Works and do I
Sewer?
do them both?
Yeah, because
Okay, well, Sue's is an easy one.
Who's doing what?
So you
Okay.
do
So I
public,
have,
don't
I'm
need
doing
to
Public
motion.
Works, she's going to
Sewer.
summarize it.
yeah, so I have Brad for committee or for administration and Parks and Rec. I have Jim for library. Police department is Kelly and fire department is Kelly. School district will be Ellen. Samantha will do Public Works and Sewer Commission. And I will introduce and sum up and answer the planning board questions as they come up.
Also, I would volunteer to relinquish police and fire if Gail would like to present.
Oh,
So I
okay.
certainly don't need to, but I'm happy
She'll
to
be,
do
she'll be
whatever.
taking notes, won't she? She'll be-
Oh, right, she is the note taker of the planning board, yeah.
Well, she could.
She could.
on the present, does she take
let's
them
ask
for,
her.
the-
Yeah.
I will ask Gail if
does
she
she
wants to
take them
give
for the
us-
planning board too?
She does.
Okay, thank you.
I will ask Gail if she would rather do that.
I just would like her to have the opportunity.
Okay.
I presented.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
And
And so this is
I
for
can
the
do
planning
more.
board meeting on September 14th.
That was my question.
Yes, so everyone has that on their calendar.
9:14, is that 6 o'clock
There we go.
There it is at 7 o'clock.
Maybe
you
it's
can't-
seven.
you won't
Kelly will be there, so.
here?
I can do more than library. Library's
All right.
not much.
There's
So-
only one line, right?
Well, if Gail doesn't
That's
want
why-
to do
that's why I
police
wondered.
and
I wanted
fire,
it to.
then Jim, you could be police and fire. Okay, and library. So either Jim or ask Gail.
Even though you did not negotiate this year for the ride on the ladder truck.
You don't have to negotiate.
Okay, so
just
what's
ask.
the
We'll take it.
negotiation now? Kelly is giving police and fire to Jim.
Yes.
Where's fire?
Unless Gail would like to take them. So again, Ellen has school district, Samantha has public works and sewer, Brad has administration, parks and rec. And then because we've gotten everything done tonight, we were super efficient, we are canceling the August 17th meeting.
Yay!
Happy August, everyone.
Joanne, will you send out a summary of who's doing what?
Yes.
Please.
Thank you. Okay.
Just a comment. I thankfully enough don't have to write any of the report, but we will need a written report for the annual report. We do have a picture from a couple meetings ago.
That's enough.
And, so typically we take a copy of what's submitted to the planning board, and the chair would make some alterations so that it could be used for the voters in the town report,
Who's done it before? Jim?
the chair.
The chair. I can offer up, I'm so excited about this. I just wanted to offer up some stuff to add for that. The fact that we updated this, the handbook. And it's the first time since 2018.
Which is nice.
And made some significant changes to efficiency for not only department heads, but for committee, I don't know, paper consumption or something of that
Reduce
nature.
administrative
My
burden.
recommendation
Yeah.
is Kelly and Kimberly do this.
Well, I'm sure other people have recommendations also. What's first? Also that I would like to say that I think that this is probably the most in-depth matrix that we've ever put together, and thankfully, you know, thanks to Scott and Danielle for working through the potential bond options to look at
That's huge.
in a big picture light, because, you know, as a community, we do have a lot of stuff on the table, and I think we really need to try to streamline the way that we plan for the next 10 years. So I'm very happy, although the numbers are large and we still have a lot of work to do on what the, you know, voters are, we're going to put forth to the voters as far as budget, school, and select board are concerned, that I think we've made some really great improvements this year to the process.
Yeah, I agree. I think this has been a very good process.
Just one more thing,
Yes, Ellen.
our meeting in September, is that here?
It is here, yes.
Okay, thank
It
you.
is at 7 o'clock. It is a planning board meeting on Thursday, September 14th.
Thank you.
We're usually first on the agenda, I believe.
We are
Yeah.
usually first.
Do you want to see a draft of what each of us is going to say? I think in the past we had tried to work something up.
I know, I don't think we ever did.
I stopped that because I didn't
Oh,
have time
You
to
can
read.
just
it.
sort of hang
All I
on to
know
this
is-
and talk
Yes.
to it.
All I know is Kim cut me off.
Yeah.
I cannot promise that won't happen again.
Told me I was talking too much.
If we have a big agenda, you might
Keeping
get
it
cut off.
brief,
I told you
right?
to talk to Kim.
Keeping it brief.
Because you do.
So
It was
just
like,
one,
Need to kiss it, keep it simple, stupid.
That's right.
just one question and then one comment. So for clarification purposes, when the meeting comes around in September, in addition to presenting the final report, will you also be speaking to the proposed, recommended changes in the handbook at that time?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, I thought that's what I understood.
I thought that's what you would be.
The chair.
Yes, I said I would take that on,
Okay,
yes.
thank you. And then if anybody's looking for inspiration for reports or talking points. The handbook actually has some really great information. Reading it cover to cover, as Joanne and I did, we were noticing the language, especially in pages 3 and 4, where they highlight the committee's objectives. It's a really great, kind of starting point if you're looking for the inspiration about, anticipating demands, preserving health and safety, increasing communication. So all the different benefits of CIP are
Nice
kind of,
preamble.
kind of nicely put in there. So I think that, more so than I think I had even realized from when I had read it a couple years earlier, you know, that the detail that they went into, I think was really helpful.
And you cannot collect impact fees unless you have a CIP.
Right.
Oh,
Yes.
thank you.
Can I request, Danielle and Joanne, when you have the new book list up, the clean version, would you mind sending that out to us?
Yes.
Thank
You're talking hard copy or email?
Do
Or
the,
you.
both?
No email.
do the members prefer the red line or the clean version? Was it too confusing to have both?
No, I think the clean,
I like
clean.
the clean.
All right, I'll take this.
We've already
Yeah.
Okay.
updated that.
If, don't email it to me, I can't print it, so if someone calls me, I'll come in and pick it up, if that's okay.
Yep.
Anything that you're gonna
Do
send
you
out
want
here,
yours mailed?
just either mail it to me, mail.
Thank you for clarifying
or
that.
Snail mail.
Yep.
Or call me and I'll drop in and pick it up.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can do that, just
Or
like.
call you?
I can
Okay.
come by.
Okay.
All right, take a motion to adjourn.
Also move.
Second.
Oh. Brad moved, Brad and Jen. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone, for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
GTV.
everyone.
We're all set.